we'll have a little bit of a geography lesson today too. But so kind of keep your in your Bibles, if it's got a map, keep one finger on the map now. So what we're going to talk about in this chapter and in the next chapter also is we're going to actually, now that all the battles and all those types of things are over, Joshua has been tasked with dividing up all that area that we talked about last week and assigning them to the different tribes. Now, we're going to kind of start out with being east of Jordan, what Moses had assigned to 2.5 of the tribes, and then in the next chapter we'll get into a little bit more of assigning the different areas to the 9 tribes that were left. So before we go any further, I'd like for Carol Brown, if we would, to lead our minds in prayer. All right, so let's start out at verse 7, chapter 13. It says, "And therefore divide this land for an inheritance to the 9 tribes and the half tribe of Manasseh, with whom Reubenites and the Gadites have received their inheritance, which Moses gave them beyond Jordan eastward, as Moses, the servant of Jehovah, gave them." So the land that's referred to here included all that God had promised to the Israelites, also kind of on the east and the west of Jordan, and half of the tribe of Manasseh is going to stay put, and the other half of it is going to actually cross over Jordan. Of course, we know that this has been done already, because the westward part has already been conquered. So basically, this is just a review of what these tribes have inherited during the period. So the Reubenites and the Gadites, they've already received their inheritance. But if you'll remember, just because they had received their inheritance, they still had to go and participate in the different battles that had to take place to secure the area that was on the west side of Jordan. Now we know that this is a very good section of land that they inherited. It's good for grazing, and it fit the needs of their tribes very well. And of course, in God's infinite wisdom, He directed Moses to allow them to have this particular part of the area as their inheritance. And they could have, if it had been in God's will, to move on to the west side also, but they kind of chose to stay there. And this is discussed in Numbers 32 verses 20 and 21 when Moses is discussing this. And I think about this because of Brother Jeff's sermon Sunday night. If you missed it, it was really good. It talks about Moses being the servant of the Lord, and there's nothing greater that can be said about the character of anybody when they're called a servant of the Lord. And obviously Moses was a true servant of the Lord, and he tried to do God's will in everything that he did, and he obeyed the will of God, and obviously that's why he was called a servant of the Lord. Comments about those verses? Okay, let's move on to verse 9. From Azor, the bank of the river Arnon, and the city in the midst of the river, and all of the plain of Medeba and Dibon. So this was a city that belonged to Moab, and the description kind of begins at the river Arnon, on which it was situated. being the border between Moab and the Amorites. Now, this is discussed in Numbers, the 21st chapter and verse 13. And this city that is in the midst, or in some of the translations it says even the city, it means that this is the same city of Aror, and it lies on both sides of the banks, is the way that I understand it. And that would be a good thing to have the river there for for water and things like that. And this city is discussed in Isaiah 17 and 2. And then we see that they're also going to inhabit all the plains of Medelba and Delban. And these are two places that's also talked about in Numbers, the 21st chapter and verse 20. And they lay in a plain, and some people take this to be the plain of Moab, but it rather seems to be a plain that was between these two places. And this is according to Joshua 13 and 17, and that Dibon was basically a plain of its own. So again, a little bit more of a geography lesson there. Let's go on to verse 10. And all the cities of Sihon and the king of the Amorites who reigned in Heshbon to the border of the sons of Amram. So this is discussed in Numbers 21 and 26. It says, for Heshbon was the city of Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who had fought against the former king of Moab and had taken all of his land out of his hands, even Amram. So these people got this particular land by conquering the Amorites to get it. And it talks about here the border, and the river that's referred to here is probably Jabbok, which is talked about in Deuteronomy 3 and 16. And it says, and the Reubenites and the Gadites I gave from Galad, even the river Amron, half the valley, and the border even to the river of Jabbok, the border of the sons of Amram. So Joshua had already been pretty much given the outline of how this was going to be divided up by Moses. And I'm sure there was discussion so that that Joshua had the clear plan of everything that God had revealed to Moses up to that point as far as dividing the land. Any comments about that verse? All right, let's move on to verse 11. And Gilead, the border of the Geshurites and the Meshabites, and all the Mount Hermon, and all the Bashan to Salcad. So this is the land of Gilead, which was part of the kingdom of Og, and half which was given to Reuben, and the other half was given to Gad. So this was kind of a border point here. And this border was discussed in Deuteronomy 3 and 14. It says, Jair, the son of Masha, took all the country of Argob as far as the border of the Geshurites and Meshabites, and he called them after his own name, Bashan, which is towns of Jair to this day. So this was an established a point here that that the children of Israel pretty much understood as a boundary. It also talks about all of Mount Hermon, which is also called several different names in Deuteronomy, and then also another part of the dominion of Og, which is discussed in Deuteronomy 3 and 10. So these were areas that the children of Israel knew well and had been established, and it may have had something to do with why they wanted this particular land, just because of the layout and the climate and that type of thing was good for the. They were kind of like herders, and it was good grazing land and things along that line. Comments about that verse?
The king of Geshur, who was Geshurite, David's father-in-law, he married the king's daughter, and that's my mother.
Right.
So this goes way back, even the time of David.
Right.
The kings.
All right, let's look at verse 13. But the sons of Israel did not put out the Geshurites and the Meshabites, but the Geshurites and the Meshabites dwell among the Israelites until this day. So in the time of Moses, and even in the time of Joshua, these people had not been disturbed. Apparently, there was not a problem with the Lord having His people dwell among these people, and they still had full possession of their cities, and they were unmolested. In the time of Moses and the time of Joshua, but they kind of became separate and distinct kingdoms, and we can read about this in 2 Samuel chapter 3, and goes into a little bit more explanation of all this. Any comments about that verse? All right, so now let's look at verse 14. Only he gave no inheritance to the tribe of Levi. The sacrifices of Jehovah, the God of Israel, made by fire, are their inheritance, as he said to them. So neither the Lord nor Moses, by his order, nor by any appointment, gave a specific inheritance to the Levites, either on the east side of Jordan or on the west side of Jordan, because as the Israelites, being the priestly tribe, their inheritance was the Lord. And this is talked about in Numbers 18 and 20, and it says, "And Jehovah said to Aaron, You shall have no inheritance in their land, neither shall you have any part of them. I am your part and your inheritance among the sons of Israel." So, this was passed down, from Jehovah to Aaron, and Aaron, passed it down through his seed. And they understood going into this situation that they were going to have no real inheritance like the other tribes were going to have, because their inheritance was the Lord, and their job was the service of the Lord. And they were the ones who were going to be making the sacrifices and doing the things necessary for the children of Israel to be in God's good graces, and they were going to serve as the priest. Now, this is not to say that they're going to be out there a bunch of beggars, because God makes provisions for his people. So the Levites had a tenth of all of the production of the land. The other groups were to provide to the Levites a tenth of what they produced, so that they would have the substance and things that they needed to live. Second of all, they had 48 cities, and each of the cities that they had were about a square of about 4,000 cubits, and they had another 2,000 cubits of ground around the city that they had as a kind of an area for their cattle and things along that line that would be able to graze. Now, if you calculate all the cubits and all that kind of stuff, in today's terms, they possessed about 53,000 acres of all of this land that the children of Israel were going to inherit. And they were to receive the first fruits and certain parts of the animals that were killed in the land. But if you think about it, this was, in the grand scheme of things, this was a very small portion for a tribe that had consented to pretty much eliminate its political existence and devote all of their service to the or all their time to the service of God, and they were to label on behalf of the people sold. And they were, though, considered, and God made provisions for them to live, and they were going to possess some of the best land that the children of Israel were going to inherit. So they needed to be independent of all the politics and all the things that that went on in these particular tribes, because their sole purpose was to serve God and to be His priests here on the earth. Now, there's some things that we can learn from that, and I don't remember which one of which one of the scholars was talking about this, but I thought it was important that we, to bring it out. First of all, this is a proper pattern for the maintenance of ministers of God. If they're there doing God's work as a minister, then it's incumbent on us to make sure that they have the things that they need, and that they're not wanting for material things, that they have those things, and they need to have it in a sufficient number that that their family and their lives can go on without distraction, so that they can concentrate solely on their ministry, and not have to worry about, well, where's my next meal coming from, or am I going to have a house to live in, or something like that. And third, is the comment was, let them not be encumbered with riches or worldly possessions, that they may not be prevented from taking care of souls. So in other words, there needs to be a good balance between having the things that they need, but not having so much of it that it becomes a distraction. And if you think about today, looking at the grand scheme of things, there are some of these store-bought preachers that are million and billionaires because of the things that they've done, and they live a lot better than most of the people that they supposedly are ministering to. So we see here that there is a balance that needs to be made between subsistence and living and being comfortable, but not having too much that the worldly things becomes a distraction. And that, I think, not only applies to people who choose to be ministers, but also that applies to us also. There needs to be a happy medium between comfort and having too much of something that it becomes a distraction. Comments about that verse? All right, let's move on. We're going to go through several verses here, and I'm going to slay a whole bunch of names as we go through here. We're going to kind of do another little geography lesson here, and we're going to talk here about the sons of Reuben. So let's start with verse 15. And Moses gave to the tribe of the son of Reuben inheritance according to their families, and their coast was from Azor on the bank of the river Arnon, and the city in the midst of the river, and all the plain by Medeba. He gave them Heshbon and all the cities in the plain of Dibon, and Bethothbaal and Beth-Bethamon. We talked about that last week. Yeah, that's the one that means hot springs, if you'll remember from last week. And Jashajez and Kemoth and Methbah and Kirchajaim and okay. Go on. I'm gonna skip all of this. You guys can read through all this. Yeah, well, that I didn't learn that in school. They taught us name recognition. So we'll pick up here at 21. And all the cities of the plains and all the kingdom of Sihon, the king of the Amorites who reigned in Heshbon, whose Moses struck with the rulers of Medium, Evi, and Rescom, and Zor, and Hor, and Ruba, and rulers of Sihon, the inhabitants of the land. The sons of Israel also killed Balaam, the son of Beor, the diviner, with the sword among their slain. And the border of the sons of Reuben was Jordan and its border. This was their inheritance of the sons of Reuben, according to their families, the cities and its villages. So Reuben's portion was basically the southern part of the area that's being discussed here. And it was good territory. They had one of the largest tracts. Mm-hmm. And here the lot of the tribe of Reuben. Of course, Reuben was Jacob's firstborn. So but he kind of lost his dignity and power, through the years and some of the things that he had done. But he still kind of got the advantage here of getting the first pick of the land that was going to be available to the children of Israel. And perhaps those of the tribe who had an eye to this desiring to be seated on the side of Jordan, since they could not expect the benefit of the best lot had they gone across Jordan. And so they kind of took the credit of being first. They saw this land, and it was going to be suitable for their type of living. And they obviously asked Moses if they could, if they could have this. And this is the, kind of the first account of how, they were going to get it. It also talks about how this particular land was conquered in the time of Moses here. So, this was flat, almost unbroken. There was trees there, and it was particularly adapted as grazing land. And, this particular tribe were herders and that type of thing. And this was really good land for them to inherit. Now, Balaam here that's talked about in verse 22 had lost his life during Israel's battle with the Midianites. And this is discussed in Numbers 31 and 8. And it says, "And they killed the kings of Midian beside the rest of their slain, Eva, Rechem, Zor, Hor, and Reba, 5 kings of Midian. And they also killed Balaam, the son of Beor, with a sword." So this all happened prior to the children of Israel inheriting this, in this particular land, as it was God's will that these people be cleared out, so that the children of Israel would be able to pass through without any problem. Comments about those verses? All right, let's move on to verse 24 and read a few verses. "And Moses gave inheritance to the tribe of Gad, the sons of Gad, according to their families. And their coast was Jazar and all the cities of Gilead, and half the land of the sons of Ammon to Ador and Rabah. And from Heshbon to Remathah, whatever it is, and Bottom, from Medina to the border of Debar. And the valley he gave them, Beth-Nimram, Succoth and Zephron, the rest of the kingdom of Sihon, the king of Heshbon, Jordan and its border, even to the edge of the sea of Chisaron, on the east side of Jordan eastward. And this inheritance of the son of Gad, according to their families, the cities and their villages." So the allotment of Gad lay in the middle of Israel's territory, east of Jordan, roughly between the Jabbok River and the northern end of the Dead Sea. So, this lay north of Reuben's lot and the country of Gad, the tribe that was in there. And this area was famous for its balm that had a healing effect. And this was a well-known area to the people. This area also was kind of famous for its forests, called the Wood of Ephraim, and it was was said before by Philip. This was the area where David was involved, in which Aspelam's rebellious army was beaten while his father David lay in the frontier cities. And this is talked about also a little bit more in other parts of the Bible. This was also they inherited the area where we sing the song about the Rose of Sharon. This was the area where this famous rose grew also. Yeah. We don't sing that one though, do we? Did we sing that one? A few times. Okay, I remember the Rose of Sharon. So, again, this was a very good land, and they say that this is excellent land to have swine or pigs. So, must have had a little bit of pig farming going on there. So, each of these areas that these tribes got were well suited to the lifestyle that they had with their animals, and they had a good water supply. There was materials to build with and all those types of, with all those types of things. Comments about those verses? All right, let's move on to verse 29. And Moses gave inheritance to the half of the tribe of Manasseh, and this was the half tribe of the son of Manasseh by their families. And their border was from Madian, all Bashan, all of the kingdom of Og, the king of Bashan, and all the towns of Jar, which are in Bashan, 60 cities. And half of Gilead and Ashroth and Edrei, cities in the kingdom of Og in Bashan, were given to the sons of Machir, the son of Manasseh, which even their half, the sons of Machir, by their families. So this half was settled in the northern portion, the most northern portion of the area. And the lot of this half tribe, this Bashan, the king of Og, was an allotment that was famous for the best timber, and it's witnessed. They talked about the oaks of Bashan, and this was an area that had really good timber, and it was very good for an area for breeding cattle. And there was a lot of bulls and rams in this particular area. And this tribe lay north of Gad and reached to Mount Hermon and in the parts of Gilead. And the other half of the tribe obviously went over to the west side of Jordan and crossed over. And this was an area that was well suited to to this particular half of the tribe. Comments about that verse? All right, let's look at verse 32. These are they whom Moses caused to inherit the plains of Moab on the other side of Jordan by Jericho eastward. But the tribe of Levi Moses gave no inheritance. Jehovah, the God of Israel, was their inheritance, as he said to them. So the description of the territory ends with a reminder that that the Levites, they weren't going to inherit a particular portion of the land because of the special relationship that they had with God. So they were going to be pretty much spread all throughout the promised land for the purpose of ministering to the children of Israel. Now we're going to see that these tribes, when they get over to the other side, they're going to kind of be choosing their portion of the promised land by lot. These 2.5 tribes, they got to pick what they wanted, and it was a little bit different for them than it was going to be for the rest of the tribes. And this was obviously God's will, but maybe they kind of sensed what was going to happen, and they thought, well, this is really good land, and we would really like to have it. So the 2.5 tribes chose, as pretty much Lot did in Genesis 13 and 10, pretty much based on appearance. They looked at the land, they liked what they saw, it suited their needs, so they picked it more because that's the land that they wanted, more than and not having to take the chance of getting something that's not quite as suitable when they chose it by lot. Maybe that showed a little bit of lack of faith in God putting them where they needed to be, but that's just the way that that's just pretty much the way that it ended up. Comments about that verse? Okay, so that pretty much finishes up that chapter. And now, with the miracles of modern technology here, we'll move on to chapter 14. Yep. Okay, so this chapter kind of forms an introduction to an account of the allocation of the land west of Jordan, or Canaan proper. And we're going to talk about the 9.5 tribes in this particular chapter. I'm not going to talk about it very much because I don't have much time left, but Bill's going to talk about it a lot in the next couple of weeks. So it was also made by lot in presence of a select number of superintendents or appointed people under the divine direction of God kind of through Moses a little bit. This is discussed in Numbers 34 and 16. And everything pertaining to civil government, even the division of the land, it didn't make any difference. Joshua was acknowledged as the chief, the head of this whole thing, and he was going to be the one who was going to be in charge of it. And it was going to be his word that was revealed to him from Moses, which was revealed to him from God, about how this was going to happen. Now, the other key character in what we're going to talk about is Eleazar, the high priest. So you had Joshua, who was the head of the civil authority, and you had Eleazar, who was head of the religious authority. They were the two top people, and they were going to be the ones who were going to supervise this dividing of the land. And they're going to have a method in how they're going to do it. So let's look at verses 1 and 2. And these are they, the sons of Israel, who inherited the land of Canaan, whom Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun, and the heads of the fathers of the tribes of the sons of Israel gave out for inheritance to them. Their inheritance was by lot, as Jehovah commanded by the hand of Moses, for the 9 tribes and for the half tribe. So, this is kind of an exact account of how the land was divided up. So, namely, there were the princes of the tribes. Each one of the tribes had their head person, father, prince, whatever you wanted to call them. They assembled in a meeting with Eleazar and Joshua, and those were the two who were appointed by the Lord to conduct this particular endeavor that was about to take place. And we know that this was about 7 years after they had entered into the promised land, because we've discussed before, it took between 7 and 8 years for them to conquer the major areas that need to be conquered, so that the children of Israel could inherit their particular part. Now, this is discussed in detail in Numbers 34 and 17, and it actually gives us the names of the people who were in that meeting. And I'm not going to sit here and read and take the time to read all this, but if you read Numbers 34:17 through 29, you will be able to see and know who the different people were that were participating in this meeting. So the divisions of the land of Canaan, according to the boundaries that were laid down in Numbers 34 and 12, this is where it is carried out according to the instructions that were given in Numbers 34 verses 16 through 29. And this was prophesied or told that it was going to be conducted by Eleazar the high priest and Joshua and the 10 heads of the tribes, the 9 plus the half. Now, we know here from the original text that this talks that we were told here that this is going to be done by lot. In other words, there was going to be some type of drawing in how this was supposed to be done. The word that's in the original text signifies that there was a stone or pebble that were used, but in some of the other versions, it doesn't really talk about that. It gives an indication that even though it was done by lot, it wasn't done by pebbles or stones, unless the inscriptions were written on the different stones. So it's interesting to kind of read how the different commentators and scholars feel that this was done. I'm gonna give you my version that I like the best, okay? And then you can have your own version, because this is an opinion, not a fact, okay? My opinion is that they had 2 vessels. Joshua had a vessel and Eleazar had a vessel, and in those in those two vessels, one of them had all of the tribes on it, and the other vessel had the different geographical areas. And what was happening is they would draw out of one vessel, and you would get the tribe, and then they would draw out of the other vessel, and they would get the geographical area. That's my opinion from all the different things that I've read. To me, that would be a logical way to do it, and obviously keeping in mind that the providence of God is going to work over this entire endeavor here. So it wasn't completely by luck. There was some providence of God involved in how this was done. Any other opinions? Well, yeah, but and I was thinking about this when we were studying. It's funny, of course, we'll talk about Caleb here in just a minute. Caleb kind of got left out of all of this deal, and he was one of the faithful spies. But we're going to see, and probably we'll talk about this next week. God took care of Caleb too. He gets rewarded. I mean, he wasn't the head guy. He didn't get all the glory that Joshua did, but in the end, God took care of him also, and which kind of tells you that you don't have to be the head person to get a reward. That there is a place for faithful followers, and the faithful followers could be rewarded just as well as
people out in a business that he might not be the boss, but he's the guy that works just under the boss and keeps the wheels spinning.
Right. Kind of the right hand man type of deal. Okay, Bill, I think I'm gonna stop there. Let you pick up from that point on, and let you divide the rest of the land there. So I appreciate everybody's attention and comments today.